Hey, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of the Hugh Capital Podcast. So, today we have a lovely, amazing, intelligent person, and her name is Chelsea Perry. I love the Princess Diana wave. I love it. I love it. So basically, what we're gonna do today, everybody, is as I have mentioned to you all, right? We are spending time introducing you all to professionals, community leaders, entrepreneurs, and to be honest, sometimes one person can be all three. That's a thing. And to be honest, Chelsea is one of those people, right? She has experience with longevity in healthcare. She's a professional. She is a founder of a career community. But with it being a community, it is a business and she needs it to make money, right? Whether it's today, tomorrow, etc. And for that reason, she is also an entrepreneur. But for today, we're going to spend a lot more time understanding her background in terms of what just led her to create Appcelerator. That is the platform that she ultimately created to ultimately introduce people to different opportunities in the realm of business, especially for those who are interested in the business of healthcare. So, if you ever thought that you felt like the only way to be in medicine or the only way to be in healthcare was by being a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or etc., those are great ways to enter the field. But they're not the only way, right? You can do some more. And Chelsea will basically take some time to help us understand what that looks like. But before I carry on and say too much, because I can say a lot of things about Chelsea, Chelsea, take it away. Who are you? Let them know who you are.
Thanks, Julissa. Honestly, I need to have you with me every time I go do some sort of talk or need an introduction because you absolutely killed it. I'm not even sure how to follow that. So well done. But hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Perry, as Juju mentioned. I wear a lot of hats, but honestly, I consider myself to be a normal girl. If you're a SZA fan, you know what song I'm talking about. But I guess going back to like my origin story, I'm originally from the Washington, D.C., Maryland area. So I always tell people I'm from D.C., but people will call me out. I'm actually from Prince George's County, Maryland. People, if you don't know where that is on the map, it's one of the most affluent, if not the most affluent, Black community in the United States. And so, yeah, I'm proud to be from Maryland. I was raised by a military family, so consider myself to be a military brat. Both of my parents were in the Air Force. They met in the Air Force. I am the eldest child, so little for those of you that are into birth order and know all of the things that come into play when being the oldest, you'll kind of start to understand why I've done so much in the short time that I've been a professional. But I'm also just like a big nerd, so really into Harry Potter and Star Wars fan fiction, reading a ton, a lot of outdoorsy activities. I played field hockey in high school. I play ice hockey now in grad school. So just I do a ton. I'm interested in a lot. Juju spoke in reference to an endeavor that I started called Appcelerator a number of years ago with my co-founder. So I'm happy to share more about that with you all. And from a professional standpoint, I spent the majority of my career in healthcare doing a number of things from operations management to growth strategy and most recently product development. And so happy to share a little bit more about the career trajectory I've had, how to make pivots if you're interested in feeling kind of stuck or interested in trying new things. Or if you're just considering going back to school, I just started my first year of business school at the Wharton School in Pennsylvania. So yeah, I can talk about a lot, but I'll kick it back over to you, Juju, because I know you have a ton of great questions, and I'm just really excited to be here and to talk to you today.
I love that intro. Honestly, you nailed your own intro, by the way. So you don't need me, but if you ever did, trust and believe, I will be right there ready to brag about you in a second. That's easy. And the reason why I loved your intro so much, for everybody listening, obviously, of course, is I think that although I was able to celebrate the fact that you are a multi hyphenate in terms of being a professional, being a community leader, being an entrepreneur, I like that you took time to let them know just who you were as a person. Like you're letting them know I'm relatable. I love me some Harry Potter. I love me some Star Wars. I do athletic stuff too. Like we're here, we're not far off. We're two in one. We're all here. We can all do these things. So I love that you included that in your intro because it just reminds people that just because you are into some of these serious things, which are the business, the technology, and etc., it shouldn't take away from the fact that you have other things that you indulge in when it comes to sports and entertainment and things like that. So I love that intro. Nailed it.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Now I want to jump right into it because once again, with someone who has just experience doing different things, I think there's a lot of things that people can learn from you. So I want to really spend some time talking about your upbringing, but I think we can get to that later if we have some more time. I
Sure.
want to start right away with you basically diving into healthcare, but not being a doctor in a world where people make you feel like that is the only thing to do. So, how did you unlock the cheat code and say, that's not what I have to do to be in healthcare? I can do something else?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I will say, like, I took a roundabout way to finding the cheat code. I was one of those people that was pre-med or bust until I just couldn't sustain that lifestyle anymore. So I will say, admittedly, I was interested in being a doctor very early on in my college career and even in high school. And I think a part of it was because I was just good at memorization and biology and some of the more scientific aspects of medicine really called me because I was good at the coursework until I got to college and sort of started to get distracted a little bit. But I was also just coming from a background where no one in my family had been a physician before. And so I was really curious about, maybe a little egotistical in this way, about like, I can be the first in my family to have this legacy and do this thing. And so it was sort of intrinsically motivated that way too. And it wasn't until I got into maybe my sophomore year of college where like more things are happening socially. I told you I come from a military background, so I was starting to do some things in college that, I do in high school. And so I started to get off track a little bit when it came to a GPA. And I also started to question, like, is this something that I can see myself being in the next 10, 20 years? Because, shout out to all my friends that have embarked on careers in medicine, but it is a long-term commitment and you've got to be focused because these are people's lives at hand. And so just taking a bit of time to reflect on where I was going in college and the things that I was interested in doing 5, 10 years out, I had to have that hard conversation with myself. Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Might there be some alternate pathways for you to explore? And so I was at a point in college, my GPA was about a 3.0, which I thought was awesome. My dad was like, this is not, you're better than this. You can do so much more academically. And he even threatened to pull me out of 4-year school and take me to 2-year college back home, living in the house. And so I just really locked in and did a lot of research around, okay, I have an interest in healthcare still, but I'm also very curious about business and how can I weave those sort of two disciplines into a career pathway for myself that makes sense for the long haul. And I stumbled upon this thing called healthcare administration, which is really, when we think about healthcare at large being 1/4 or 1/5 of our nation's GDP, understanding it's truly a business in addition to a service. I thought, okay, like, this is somewhere where I can see myself thriving, and I'm interested in what this looks like career-wise. So it was, in short, doing a ton of research about career prospects in healthcare administration. What did I need to do from an advanced degree perspective to be competitive in the field? And yeah, I switched my major from biology to public health, started looking at internships in the hospital space. And that sort of set me on my path to being a business person in the healthcare space. Until I started to pick up some additional interest in entrepreneurship and founding companies. And so I know we'll talk more about that. But as you can tell, I'm someone that is curious about a lot, but really driven to kind of be the best that I can be and a consummate professional in whatever it is that I'm doing at a particular time until, my interest takes me elsewhere.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned that keyword research, right? Like, the reality is, whenever you are trying to pursue something or trying to transition into something, it's very imperative that you are doing your research. And I think we should also be clear about what research looks like, because there isn't one type of research, right? Like, to your point, Chelsea, like, research can be getting online and looking up careers like in the world of healthcare administration. For somebody else, it may be doing that just a little bit, but really going hard to find out like what events are nearby that have these healthcare admin professionals that I can meet and directly learn from to see if I'm really interested in like what they're doing. So it really could just look like you doing a Google search and reading articles. It can look like you like trying to actually meet people and listen to their stories about their experience in their work. Or it could be like you probably DMing a couple people on LinkedIn and saying, "Hey, how you doing? I see that you're at this company with this role." And in all honesty, you're probably not looking to apply because you really don't know what it is and what they do, but it's like your learning opportunity to go back and forth with that person and learn. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of itemize like different ways someone can research when they're trying to pursue something. And I love that you said the word research.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next thing I want to talk about before we even get into the community things, because I want people to understand why I believe you are someone who is credible to like create the organization slash company that you made. So what I want you to do is, I don't want to call it a timeline, but just kind of walk us through the name of the company, the role you had, and what you had to do there when it comes to the things that you did in healthcare. I
Sure.
want to paint a picture for them.
Yeah, so I will say my first real opportunity in healthcare was when I was a grad student at Virginia Commonwealth University. I was studying to get my master's of healthcare administration, and I just really needed an internship so I understood what it is that I was talking about. Like, a lot of people purport to want to do these things in their career professions because they're seeing TikToks or they're seeing other thought leaders speak about their perspective, but they don't have a worldview of their own that's informed by real work experience. And so for me, I felt like in order to become a more credible healthcare professional, I needed to see what was going on at the front lines. So I became what's called a patient access representative in the Virginia Commonwealth Hospital on my campus, one of the biggest academic medical institutions in the state of Virginia. And my whole role was to check patients in before and after their surgeries. So we had people coming in with broken body parts or bones. We had people coming in for other elective procedures. And my job was to get them comfortable before their surgery, communicate with their families during the surgical process, and then afterwards make sure they have what they needed to be discharged appropriately. And I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of connect with individuals at the front doors of the healthcare system, because my end goal was eventually to be a leader in some capacity in healthcare, and not understanding what people do at the front lines, I think, makes you a less credible leader. So that was my first formative internship or position in the healthcare space. From then on, I went to do what's called an administrative fellowship, which is really just a leadership development program or management training program to help people that are exiting grad school get their first real project management and supervisory experience in the healthcare setting so that they can go on to manage a department or a division within an organization. I did that fellowship out in Los Angeles, which is where I started to find other people and creators that were doing interesting things, founding companies, and where I caught the entrepreneurial bug. But I spent 2 years at Kaiser Permanente as an administrative fellow and absolutely loved that experience. Right around that time, my parents were getting stationed in Tokyo, Japan. So I was across the United States while they were still in Washington, D.C., but I got a call from my dad. And he told me, like, hey, we're moving to Tokyo. In a couple months, I got orders. And I was like, what? So I made the tough decision to move from California, where I really saw myself starting a life, even though I couldn't afford a house, and moving back to the Washington, D.C. area. I took a new role at a couple organizations. One, DaVita Kidney Care, which is one of the largest dialysis providers in the United States. Mm-hmm. Really incredible organization, works with marginalized populations like ourselves. Unfortunately, we are, as African Americans, some of the population that are most burdened with chronic kidney disease. So it was really special to be at an organization that was focused on how do we manage this condition and make sure that people have the dignity to continue living a life wherein they have access to healthcare for this really critical need. Right around that time too, I was getting interested in the product side of the business in healthcare. And so I was curious about opportunities in product, knew I didn't have necessarily any product-like experience, and just didn't have the confidence to shoot my shot at those types of roles. So I applied to a chief of staff role at CVS Health, where they were doing some really interesting work in the kidney care space. And I thought I could add value because I had spent time at DaVita. Turns out for that chief of staff role, they were finishing up interviews, making offers to their top candidate, but a hiring manager in another division shot me an email and said, hey, I saw your resume. We're wrapping up interviews for this other thing, but I actually think you would be a great fit for this senior manager role in product development. And in my mind, I'm like, what? Like, I didn't apply to that role because I didn't think I was qualified. And the rest is history. I got my big break in product at CVS Health. Shout out to one of my mentors there. She really changed my life. And yeah, I mean, that's just a short recap of some of the things that I've done in healthcare and the organizations that have given me the opportunity to really show them what I have in terms of intellect, but also the capacity to be a leader.
And I just love diversity in the roles that you've had. Like, even though, yes, you're still in like healthcare and you're still doing that work, each role is slightly different and allows you to contribute in a different way. And I thought that was very important to highlight so that people understand like, there's not one task in healthcare. There's so many things that go into running a system that works for both the patients and the people that work there. And then the third person really is the people who are making money off of it also. There's also that. So I thought it was really cool to kind of hear you walk everybody through the titles, the name of those companies to familiarize themselves with what's out there, but obviously still knowing here's the contribution you made. So that was lit. Now, with that experience, I want everybody to understand from you, Chelsea, when did you know it was time to create Appsilerator? Like, you have this background, you have this expertise. How did you know, like, I am officially a credible individual to start this?
Well, I will say oftentimes with founding a company or just starting on a new endeavor, there's a ton of imposter syndrome where you're not completely sure that you're ever ready or that you're ever the most credible person to start an endeavor, because there's so many more people that have more years in the game than you do. They have more, capital to start their companies, but eventually you just gotta, push go or pass go, collect your $200 and start something. And that's sort of where I was. I think the, seminal moment for me where I was like, I have to step up, I have to do something, was when I was in a deliberation at Kaiser Permanente. I was a second year fellow. And as a second year fellow, you get the privilege to sit on some executive meetings where they're choosing who's going to succeed you in the fellowship program. And so I was listening to the executives make their decisions. They ended up picking 6 candidates for the fellowship program, and none of them were of African American or African descent. And so it was like, dang, we had like at least 3 or 4 really dope Black people in this final slate of candidates, and none of them got selected. We understand things that happen, and we're not saying that, we are entitled to any of these positions, but it's interesting. We had done a really great job of providing a diverse slate of candidates, and it didn't necessarily go the way that we thought it would. And what's interesting is one of the executives, white woman, she is honestly my shero, rose her hand and said, you know what, guys, talking to her colleagues, I'm really disappointed that we didn't actually select any individuals that were African American for this role. And what she did next was even more incredible. Not only did she really start this really tough conversation amongst her peers, but she also said, I'm going to personally fund this 7th spot for a fellow from my hospital's budget. This is not in the plans. We don't accept 7 fellows. We never accepted 7 fellows, but I'm so called to this mission of diversity, equity, inclusion in healthcare. It starts with the people that we have in our organization and getting these really privileged positions to do this sort of work. I want to fund that 7th spot for someone. And I won't tell the rest of the story because it's not necessarily material to your original question of like, how did you know when to act? But I think it was so inspiring for me to see, my organization, in some ways lacks diversity at the highest ranks of the institution. But this white woman is really willing to sponsor someone to change that narrative. And I think there's so much we could be doing as early career professionals to also make sure that we're doing our part to bring in people behind us. And so that was really the impetus for me to start Appsilerator and think differently about mentorship and community building with the end goal of making sure that we have enough diverse representation at the highest ranks of leadership in healthcare.
That was a great story to share. Like, please don't feel like because it didn't directly answer something, it shouldn't have been shared. Like, that is the content that people need to hear about, right? Because when it comes to this podcast, we're very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that for you to offer up a storyline that gives people insight into what that actually looks like, especially from someone who is not from an underrepresented background, like, that's empowering, right? To know that she is not of that ethnicity, she is not of that culture, but felt like, no, like, diversity looks like them being here too. And it's not like you're just doing it because they are of that background. They're obviously quality people. If they weren't, they wouldn't have even been a part of a final round or even a part of this interview process. So, like, why is there no space for them? Like, why weren't they great enough to make it?
I think too with this particular executive is she just recognized sometimes the role that unconscious bias plays in a lot of ways that leaders are selected and people in general are selected to be a part of organizations. So we've all heard that statistic of, people choosing people to join their organization or be a part of their team that look like them because they can trust them, or they think they can trust them because of what they perceive to be similar backgrounds between them. And oftentimes we're left out of that equation because we don't have that sponsor or mentor in the organization that can identify with some of the worldviews and experiences that we've had. And so I thought it was really impressive and commendable that she recognized her own bias and was able to say, I'm going to open up my pocketbook so that, the buck stops with me and we're leaving that sort of bias at the door in future generations.
I love it. I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do want to go back to the comments you made about you being empowered. Obviously, that she was a more like senior professional, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
But you feeling empowered to watch what she did to end up making you feel like, even as an early career professional in this space, I want to contribute to this initiative. And I guess my question now to you is, how did you get the idea that it had to be Appcelerator? Like, how did you know it had to be that?
That's such a great question. I don't know. I think I was just looking back in my own experience of like, okay, where did I go to find mentorship of people that looked like me? Like LinkedIn was kind of a thing, but there's just so many more features on LinkedIn now that didn't exist back then. And there weren't these like really interesting professional communities necessarily when I was thinking about Appcelerator back in 2017, 2018, especially in the healthcare space. So there were some professional societies that I was a part of, but I felt like a lot of Black and brown individuals were at the fringes of some of those like organizations and groups. And so I just thought, there's got to be a better way where we can coalesce people that are interested in bringing more diverse representation to their organizations, whether or not they hold that title of executive or talent acquisition or, director of diversity, equity, inclusion. There's things that we can be doing with our own individual efforts to be a part of this work. And I think that community building is one way I saw that happening. Tech is the other way I saw that happening. So we know how impactful LinkedIn, MySpace, even Facebook have been to finding people and having the confidence to message or talk to people that you literally don't know. And so I thought, okay, there's something to be said for the intersection of technology and community, especially when it comes to this particular work that I'm interested in. And what can I do as someone that has that credibility, I think, from a healthcare perspective to say, I see you, I want to work with you, I want to connect you to individuals that also want to work with you and prepare you for the tall task of being in whatever organization or role that you want to be in, and ultimately killing that role, because you're not going to make it to leadership unless you perform. So how do you get the people around you and in your circle this personal board of directors sort of mentality so that you have what you need in terms of resources and support to make sure you thrive in organizations and ultimately reach it to the top?
That was a great answer. And I'm curious to like, what does like that day-to-day experience look like for someone who is a part of the Appcelerator? Like, what does it look like? My name is Julissa. How do I sign up for this? Like, how do I engage with this? How do I benefit from it?
Yeah, great question. So at its core, Appcelerator is really a diversity, equity, inclusion, talent development platform. So we match people that are looking for opportunities in healthcare and outside of that industry as well, with people that are sort of near peer mentors or like 5 or 6 years ahead of you, maybe in an organization, know what you're going through in terms of the recruitment struggle, know who to connect you to in the organization that's going to be helpful in getting the conversations that you need to be successful in these interview process. And then ultimately making sure that at the end of the day, you're prepared to advocate for yourself when it comes to negotiations once you get that offer. So we're trying to find people that are interested in that mentorship perspective, but also are reflecting and saying, hey, from a professional development standpoint, I need help. Like my resume is not where it needs to be. If I get that question of what's my strength and weakness, I don't really know how to answer that. And we find those two groups, bring them together on the platform, and then say, oh, by the way, employer X, you said that it was really important for you to have X% of your organization look like this by 2025. Cool. We got all those people in one place. Come hire them. Come have these conversations with them. They're job ready. And so from a sort of founding standpoint, when we put together Appcelerator, it was really important to find people that could connect to that mission, but also make it really accessible in the form of a landing page, social media, to say, you can come find us, we do exist. And so for people that are interested in being a part of the Appcelerator program, they'll essentially apply to our accelerator on our website. It's a really short application form. We're asking people to include their resumes. What's their career desire or their dream job? How do they see themselves needing to be developed by a mentor or a coach? And then we take them through a 30-minute interview, hearing a little bit more about that narrative, and ultimately decide, hey, they're ready, they're go-getters, and we can help them and match them to a mentor so that they can, be successful in whatever their job search process may lead them to. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's a long way of
that was good.
Like, what does Appcelerator entail? But from start to finish, essentially, anyone that comes into the Appcelerator program can rest assured that you have someone that's Black, brown, or an ally that's with you every step of the way, from application submission to offer to negotiation, making sure you're getting an opportunity to be in an organization that's invested in you, where you can really see yourself growing your career.
I love that. And sorry for being biased here, y'all, but the reason why this particular interview is one of my favorite interviews is really because I can relate to it so much. Like, for those of you that already know this, right? Like, my goal was to be a doctor. I literally finished undergrad still thinking I was going to be a doctor. And it wasn't until I was 6 months into my first job out of college, I realized that I was teaching like high school students about healthcare careers, but I felt bored just teaching them about things they already knew, which was being a doctor, nurse, etc. So I took the time to do research for them in terms of what else can you do in the realm of healthcare. There's the business side, there's the tech side. And I did all that homework for them. And I'm like, wait a minute, I never did this for me. Like, I didn't know I can be on the business and tech side of healthcare. I didn't even think about there being a tech side of healthcare. And I realized, wait, this makes more sense for me. This business side, this is for me. Like, being a doctor sounded great, it sounded cool, but I just couldn't marry the idea of being in school for 4 more years. It just wasn't hitting for me, it wasn't. So that's why I feel like what you're doing is so important, because for people like myself, if I knew of an organization like this at the time, I feel like I would have gotten to where I am now a little sooner, and I would have had the right mentorship for it, but I really had to wing it. Like, I mean, I had to struggle to find people who are on the business and tech side of healthcare. I just didn't know where they were. I would go to networking events and it would be medical practitioners, and they're great, they're dope, but it's not exactly what I wanted to do. And I feel like what you're doing is so empowering, because for those who want that other side of healthcare, they now have a solution. They have you. So that's my thank you to you. But I do have a question though after that. What I want you to actually do for me is, I think you gave us a great walkthrough in regards to what does it look like to be someone who is joining the platform. I want you to spend some time just kind of like itemizing a couple of like roles or spaces that exist in healthcare for people who are on the business and tech side.
Yeah. Oh, I love this question, because like you, Julissa, like when I was coming up, I really, really felt that there were a couple of pathways that were very celebrated. And the idea of a hospital or healthcare institution that was run by business professionals, like, it never crossed my mind. It's just like, the hospital exists in my community. They're doing their thing. Ambulances are going by and people's lives are getting saved and babies are born. But there's so much that goes into the behind the scenes aspect of healthcare that people should be abreast of. And so I'm happy to spend some time like sharing more about that. So we talked about the healthcare administration umbrella. Really, you can think of those as the business professionals that help make sure the doctors and the nurses know where they need to be, know that they have access to the equipment and the tools that they need to be successful for their patients. But within healthcare administration, there's so many more technical roles, whether it's in IT, making sure that electronic medical systems and all of the technology that powers these different institutions is at its best, that they're protected from outside influences or cybercrime and all of that stuff. So we've got like the IT sort of umbrella there. We've got, of course, product professionals that are envisioning what does the future of healthcare look like, and how can products and services look differently 5, 10, 20 years from now, so that people can do dialysis in their home, or they can have a conversation with their doctor and see their face on their phone screen. And so there's people that are in that sort of product vertical that are thinking about bringing new solutions to market so that patients can do things that, 20 years ago weren't possible. There's also people on the finance side. So making sure that these organizations are financially solvent and thinking about, too, how do we find new opportunities to do business? There are a lot of organizations that are partnering with big tech companies like Google to say, how can the electronic medical system look different? How can we be able to type in what is insurance and get actual answers and how do I use this insurance card when I go to the hospital? And so I think that those finance professionals and business development professionals that are thinking strategically about partnerships with big tech companies or other traditional healthcare institutions like Walgreens, where you can go and see a doctor too, those are really important professionals in the healthcare ecosystem as well. And then there's all the people that support the clinical professionals that deliver the healthcare, those surgical technicians that are making sure the equipment is where it needs to be, that it's safe, that it's clean before you get your surgery. They're the people that are in the supply chain space that are making sure you have the PPE when we have our next, unfortunately, pandemic that's coming, whenever it's coming, making sure we're better braced this time to have everything that we need in the spaces that we need them to make sure that populations have a healthcare experience where everything is on the table and where it needs to be. So I can go on and on about the types of individuals that make up the healthcare system, but all that to say, opportunity in healthcare is really limitless. Anything that you can think about an organization that's not a healthcare institution, and the types of roles that they have, likely it's in the healthcare setting too. We need our economics folks. We need our people that understand data science and where is, the trends in population health. We need those people thinking about the cure to cancer and, what does drug development look like? So you can tell I'm getting really passionate. I think
I love that though.
it's for people to know that these things are out there because it can be tricky to go to college or to graduate college and just not have the information that you need to make a decision about presumably what you're going to be doing for the next 5-10 years in your career. And so the more informed people are about their options, I think the better prepared they are to make decisions to, go somewhere where they can see themselves for the long haul.
I love that. Honestly, I'm just like listening to you in awe because that definitely is like a solid list. And those are definitely things that I would have highlighted if I was answering the question. So you nailed it. That was good.
Great.
And even though we're nearing the end of this interview, I do want to get an understanding from you. Just one more thing about like the aspect of building a community-based business. I want to understand, what do you feel at this moment in your business? Like, what is the hardest thing that you have to do right now? Like, what's hard for you?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I think one of the hardest things is to stay focused on like 3 or 4 things because me and my co-founder have idea after idea, like literally on a daily basis, where we see something we're inspired by or we recognize like this thing in the system is broken, we should try to fix it. And ultimately, as founders, if you don't have like a list that you're focused intently on and getting those things done before you move to the next, you're not going to be successful. And so I think one of the hardest things to do in business is really think about, okay, what are the top 3 or 4 priorities that I have over the next X months? And how am I going to execute on those things before I move on and chase after the next thing that's shiny? And I think for us, something that we're really thinking about in terms of Appcelerator is our growth. We started with our core customer segment of being professionals that are interested in matriculating into the healthcare space. What does that look like for them? How do we prepare them to do that? But as I look across, the professional space and think about, okay, where do we also need other Black and brown talent? I'm thinking consulting, I'm thinking finance, I'm thinking media and entertainment. And I want to be able to bring the Appcelerator solution to more individuals that are interested in professions outside of the healthcare space. And so we're doing a lot of research around, okay, where are those next couple of industries do we need to tackle? And what are the strategic partnerships and alignment that we have to have with HBCUs or minority serving institutions or employers that honestly have a lot of money that they haven't done anything with since George Floyd, even though they said to contribute. And so we're spending a lot of time just thinking about like strategic partnerships and alignment and really figuring out, okay, who is our core customer group that we're trying to serve and how do we find them?
I like that. And I do have a final question for you. But before I ask it, I do want to ask you, is there any like general advice that you want to give to one, people who are pursuing a job in the healthcare space? And then I want you to give advice to those who are building community-based businesses.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want.
Great question. Well, for first, people that are considering jobs in healthcare and how should they navigate the plethora of opportunities that you see, like Juju, I think you said something really important in the beginning of this interview, which is like, don't understate the importance of talking to people. There are a lot of people in roles that are shiny and that look good on the announcement on LinkedIn or Instagram that people aren't fulfilled in. They're not really that happy to be at that organization, but you would never know that. And so it's really important to figure out a way, even if you're not extroverted, you consider yourself to be someone that like doesn't know how to ask for help. Be assured that there are Black and brown professionals on LinkedIn or wherever your community is that are interested in talking to you and really telling you like, this is what's up, like this is how you get in the door, or this is how I'm thinking about getting out of the door. And without having some of those really candid conversations, you might end up making a decision that's really not a good fit for the professional lifestyle that you're looking for, or even the personal fulfillment that you're looking for in your career. So I would say, for those that are looking into healthcare, start with having really critical conversations with people, because you're going to find a lot on the internet. But really talking to the people that are doing the things that you want to do, I think are really critical. And for your second question of, if you're thinking about building a community, how do you get started? I think, don't spend too much time in analysis paralysis. When I was thinking about Appcelerator for the first time, I was doing a ton of research on like, okay, what other companies out there that are, serving this demographic, that are killing it, that I can kind of model my business after, or find something that they're not doing that well and disrupt. And I was really intimidated by the types of companies that are out there. Like I would consider some of Appcelerator's competitors to be LinkedIn, to be, MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, a program that I hailed from that's doing amazing work. And so if you are stuck in analysis paralysis and you see there are a lot of companies out there that are doing something that you also want to do, don't let that be a barrier to learning, because there's a new spin that you can put on whatever it is, the community that you're trying to generate. And there's some value proposition that you have that you just have to unlock. But I also think being strategic and making sure you're having that conversation with yourself about, am I the right person to do this? If I didn't have the credibility in healthcare, if I hadn't have been in organizations like the National Association of Health Services Executives, these other communities that I am that are serving Black and brown talent, then I don't think I would have been the right person to start Appcelerator, because it wouldn't have been true to self. People wouldn't have believed me. They would have been like, you don't even have nobody to bring to this community. So also be thinking, if you're starting a community, like how can I build credibility? How can I be putting content out on TikTok or LinkedIn to show people I know what I'm talking about, and you should be a part of the thing that I'm generating, because I'm going to also have people around me that are going to be able to help and also know what they're talking about.
I like that. That was a great, first of all, no, not that. Those were great answers, because you honestly took the time to answer for both populations of people, which I really feel like you speak to and that you inspire. So that was phenomenal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And now my final question to you, which I think is a very powerful question, I think you'll agree with me, is, Chelsea, what does the future of healthcare look like?
That is a tricky question, because, I've been to so many healthcare conferences where there are like healthcare futurists that are telling you like the future of healthcare, we're pulling up to the hospital in like a Batmobile, or, we'll be able to modify genetic technology using these things so we can choose whether or not you're going to have a boy or girl when you give birth, or, cancer won't exist no more because we've taken that gene out of your DNA sequence. So I think there are so many more credible people that are able to talk about like the future of healthcare with these really interesting concepts than I am. But I would say often what's overlooked is what healthcare will become if we don't take it seriously as a country. And so the fact that there are so many people, still millions of people, that don't have access to healthcare because of their race or ethnicity, or because they're not able to afford an insurance plan, is really concerning. It should be concerning to all of us. And so sometimes when I hear people talk about the future of healthcare, it's with this like rainbows and butterflies type of innovative mindset, and that's great. But I think we should also think about the future of healthcare. If we don't step in and say, you know what, Dr. Oz, you're not going to be the next senator of Pennsylvania, because you're not thinking about how do we make sure people have access to the things that they need in healthcare. And I think that's something that's worth being said on a podcast like this, where I know the community that you've built is also interested in the innovative solutions, but how can we do more to make sure that the healthcare that we have today becomes better, not just because of tech, but because we're doing right by everyone, and we understand that healthcare is a right, not a privilege.
Beautiful response. Magnificent. No, honestly, I thought that was very thoughtful. And what I'm most impressed by with that response is the fact that you were able to still acknowledge various topics that come up when people are discussing what the future of healthcare looks like. Like, you're giving our audience insight into the fact that people are doing genetic manipulation and other things like that. But you're still acknowledging that even though there are people out there who may be more of an expert in this space than you are, you still do have something to say. And that's something, at least for now, there's obviously more, but that thing for now is acknowledging the fact that how can we really build healthcare to be this beautiful, best, great system and do genetic manipulation and all these cool sciences if we're not ensuring that these things are accessible to people no matter their background, right? And that's very important to acknowledge. And that's why I think that answer was beautiful.
Awesome. I felt comfortable saying that stuff. I know it's some hot takes. I know that your community also is interested in how do we do the hard things? How do we have the hard conversations? So hopefully you guys can appreciate that perspective.
I think they appreciate it because I know I do. And I hope you all do for real, because honestly, she really gave you all a really thought-provoking, transparent answer. And I think that transparency is something that a lot of people, they don't want to give. And that's a big deal. So I appreciate that, Chelsea. Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, thanks. I feel more comfortable because I'm not aligned to a professional organization right now. Like I said, I'm in my MBA right now. So I represent myself. I don't have to worry about like my boss seeing this and being like, what the hell? Because I don't have a boss right now.
That's right. You can say whatever you want. That's right. No, I love that. Well, honestly, Chelsea, this was an amazing interview. I really enjoyed it. Once again, it's something that is dear to my heart because once upon a time, I was that person who would have needed and would have benefited from your program. And I think what you're doing is excellent, because how many of us can really name organizations that cater to people who are trying to be on the business side of healthcare? It's really mostly organizations to be a doctor, a dentist, and things like that. And it's important, but we also need people on the other side as well, right? We're talking about having more diverse doctors, nurses. Well, you also need diverse admin leaders who are also advocating for the kinds of doctors that are being hired, right? And making sure that they're comfortable doing their jobs, right? So I think that you were amazing, and I'm really grateful for you doing this interview.
Yeah, likewise. I love what you're doing, Juju. Keep having the tough conversations and just giving people the platform to be able to speak out about things that are important to them. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope I'll get invited back sometime to do something else.
You're always welcome back. Always. So with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this interview. Don't forget, there is another one with Chelsea. And funny enough, actually, we're going to spend some time talking about basically this checklist for what you should be thinking about, what you should be doing if you have an idea for this community-based business, but you just don't know where to start. Don't miss out on the episode. We'll see you all in 2 seconds. Bye, everybody.
Bye.